I mentioned in the beginning when we kind of looked at where we were going, we're creating the story of the unit, and then I want to add to that by thinking about the academic language that kids are going to come across and plan in advance for that. When I was thinking about the why, besides language being my passion, I mean, I started my career at Cuesta del Sol, and then I went to Stevenson because it had the highest number of language learners. Like, it's the hat I wear all the time, but I think probably if I asked you, how many of you have at least one language learner in your classroom? Would all of you raise your hand? If you have at least one language learner in your classroom, will you raise your hand for me? So this applies to all of those students, whether, like, even if you only have one student. When I think of the plan of equity and that little magnifying glass came on the screen, like, it's part of equity, making the learning accessible to all students. But then on the math level, we were talking about, well, what I'm talking about really feeds into this idea of math talk, and that supports all students. I'm sure that you have students in your class who have a really solid procedural understanding, and they can do the math, they're fast, they're accurate, but when it comes time to ask them to explain their thinking, it's, I just know. And so there's a difference between the procedural knowledge and a student's conceptual knowledge, and the more we can support them in being able to explain their thinking, that kind of expands, that ability to know why something works and know like different connections between an algorithm to another and what's happening there. You're getting more into the conceptual knowledge. A student can do it, they probably memorize the algorithm, but can they explain their thinking? Well, now I have a great next step for my high students who need the next level. For me, I start with language. I want to support them to explain their thinking. And the supports I would give to them also support my language learners. And for them, I want to give them an opportunity to express themselves. There was a great quote by Lily Wong Fillmore, who is a language guru, and she says, no one is a native speaker of academic language. So all of your students are learning academic language, and that's the language of school and work. Like, that's the language that's going to impact them in their future. So I wanted to just do a quick brief overview of when you're thinking about language, you can think about it in multiple tiers. Tier 1 are the language we use every day. They're most familiar to students. This is the language they're most using on the playground. Then there's Tier 2, and so we're getting more into some meaty vocabulary that doesn't necessarily come naturally to kids, but it's high utility academic vocabulary. So it's what you're using across content areas. We make predictions in literacy, and we also make predictions in science. So same word. We have averages to describe an average student. We also use that word in math to mean operation, a problem we're trying to solve. So there are a lot of words that are found in multiple content areas. Then you can see it's the smallest piece of the pyramid. There's Tier 3, which are domain-specific academic vocabulary, which is usually only found in that content area. So I'm thinking of addend. I can't think of another situation where I would use the word addend that it wouldn't be in math. So they're very specific. And I bring this up just to, because I think the curriculum attempts to bring to the surface the words that you might want to introduce. Oftentimes, they're the Tier 3 words, but sometimes, like in this one, partners, that's a word that's used in multiple contexts. That's the word addends, right? That's Tier 3. But I think it's worth knowing that there's a whole other mountain of vocabulary that students need to be able to express their thinking. And if I can at least have that in mind before I start the unit, I'll be more likely to set my students up for success, especially those kiddos who are coming, who are way behind their native English-speaking kids who they need extra support in academic language. So I'm going to offer some ways to beef up planning for those other words that are not right on the top of the page of each lesson. So when you're thinking about the language that students are going to need to understand what they're going to encounter, I like to start with a backward mapping sort of situation where I'm looking at the assessment and I'm looking at it for language first. Like, what's going to come up for kids on this assessment when I'm trying to get a gauge of what can they do in math? I don't want them to get hung up on the language. There also might be things in this assessment that is powerful academic language that I could be giving them multiple exposures to throughout the lessons. Just pepper it in if they use a different word that my kids aren't familiar with. Well, now I just found another opportunity to build their competence in using that language and understanding it. And when they get to this, they won't freeze up. And you've probably noticed that the 3 common assessments and performance tasks, very different than what we do on a day-to-day, because it's not math expressions curriculum. So if nothing else, take a look at those performance tasks before you start that unit, because I noticed when I was working with a dual language teacher that there were some words that the kids would have never seen before. So now they're at a total disadvantage for really understanding and being able to show their math abilities. So these are great resources, and there are a lot of places online, but even if you happen to have the skinny book, the assessments are in here too. But what I really want to focus on is another gem, which are the puzzle penguins. And I was just working with a 5th grade team who are like, yeah, they've been seeing the puzzle penguins all through the grades and they're over it. And so he's coming up with creative ways of saying, like, this is his problem that he messed up on, the teacher, and getting buy-in. So there are different ways that you could present this. But the idea is that students actually have to explain their thinking here, to explain why puzzle penguins off track. And I was thinking about my experience teaching 5th grade and thinking, oftentimes the kids would be doing puzzle penguins and I'd be like, no, that's not enough, keep writing. No. But I never modeled for them what it should look like. I never did them myself. I never thought ahead of what language are they gonna need to answer this. Instead, I looked at it and was like, nope, keep going. I didn't really think ahead, and this is the moment where they're gonna build their conceptual knowledge. It all came crashing together for me when we were planning this, oh, I wish I could go back. So I wanted to give you an opportunity to look at the puzzle penguins with new eyes and think about it from the language perspective. How can we capitalize on these opportunities to get the kids to explain their thinking, whether they need language support or they're high, procedural students who we want them to start explaining their thinking and really prove that they know it. These are awesome moments to do that. So in the TE, it went away. Can I grab this really quick? So I didn't know this, but I do now, that in the beginning pages of a unit, all the pages that I used to go past the TE that I had my little sticky on it. In the beginning where it's talking about planning for math, there's a place that tells you where all the puzzle penguins are. So, because like I said, full disclosure, I didn't plan for this very well, the way I wish I would have. So they just show up and in a lesson, oh, there's a puzzle penguin, and my kids would do it. Now I realize that actually before you start teaching, there's a place that says getting ready to teach Unit 5, and it tells you where the puzzle penguins are gonna show up. So if I know I really wanna take advantage of this time to capitalize on the language and conceptual knowledge, I know that's gonna happen in 1, 4, 7, and 8, and I can go right to those lessons instead of flipping through them or them just showing up and me not being prepared for it. So know that this is here for you, and this kind of blew my mind. So in a minute, we're gonna move to an activity where I actually took one puzzle penguin from Unit 5 in 5th grade and one from the measurement unit in 4th grade, so that you can actually go through the process of doing the puzzle penguin yourself to get a sense of what is your struggle with it? What is the language you're looking for that you're going to be asking your kids to do? And can you use that to plan for the language that's going to come up in your unit? So